dog owner in Hong Kong, it's hard not to know about Buddy Bites. And you guys just expanded to Singapore and fast growing since 2020. And little do they know is that you come from a property industry, not from any other pet industry. So I'm so curious about this journey that you had.
Yeah, I think very complimentary there. We very much still see ourselves as a young brand, but it's certainly gone relatively well the first 2 years. You're absolutely right, though. It's a bit of a strange career path, pivoting from real estate into pet food. I've always in some way, shape or form wanted to start my own business. And then just prior, I guess, to setting up Buddy Bites, for about the year or two prior, I was doing a part-time MBA whilst working in real estate. Certainly the education piece was very useful, but it also sort of gave me an understanding that if you really are passionate about something, you can always make time. And I started kind of researching more and more into the direct-to-consumer space. So a huge trend in the US and the UK, I guess, kind of disrupting industries that have incumbents who are hugely large and essentially monopolize or oligopolize industries by delivering product direct to people's doors. I love the idea of really making that consumer experience more fun. And I also felt that there really wasn't that many people doing it in APAC and particularly in Hong Kong. So got a little bit down that rabbit hole of podcasts and books within that space, and began to research what would work in Hong Kong. That kind of culminated after a decent bit of research of having dinner with my co-founder, Chris, who at the time had 25 kilos of dog food in the corner of his house. So we started allocating some time to researching the pet food space and seeing if there was an opportunity to disrupt that industry. And the kind of telltale signals were all the same. It was a very heavily oligopolized industry. It's a very heavy product. Direct to consumer business model definitely suits it. I think people love their pets and love treating their pets. So being able to do it in a consumer friendly manner that makes it an enjoyable process rather than a lot of people will go to a shop that in Hong Kong is often quite cramped and not that enjoyable to be in, and kind of sea of pet food brands that all look pretty similar. It's a bit of a can't see the wood from the tree scenario. So then it kind of just snowballed. We thought, why not? Let's give this a decent go. And it snowballed a bit into where it is now.
And what was Chris doing by then?
Chris was working in headhunting for financial services. I think when people ask about co-founders, it's key, I think, to have a good balance, both personality-wise and also skill set-wise. It's absolutely vital to have someone who you can lean on in the stressful times, in terms of just one of those people that if you put something on his plate, it will get done. So I think that's probably a big factor in how it got started. It wasn't really a, shall we do this? It was, let's do it and see what happens.
And then it was 2020 when you guys started.
The original launch was very much a, let's test this. Let's try and allocate a bit of time, a bit of capital to it and see if there is a yearning for both the pet food product, and also a big factor in what we do is for every 2 kilograms we sell, we donate one back to shelters. It was always going to be a core of the business. And we've kind of doubled down on that as we've seen the response to it.
What kind of opportunities did you see in the pet food market? Because traditionally it's been dominated by multinational conglomerates, and it might have been quite challenging to understand the market as a startup, right?
When we kind of researched it, you're precisely right. There's 3 big multinationals that dominate a huge portion of the pet food space. And in some ways you can look at that and say it's very intimidating. However, there's also, if you're looking at a glass half full scenario, there's quite a few blind spots that these larger corporations perhaps don't think about too much. Our customers are dogs. Our customers can't review, can't comment. They can't speak English, unfortunately. I wish they could.
I wish they could. Tell me, Becky.
The people who can actually comment on the product and the people who are buying the product aren't using the product themselves. What they'll really respond well to is branding, convenience, and really, really good customer service. I think being able to pick up the phone or drop us an email, drop us a WhatsApp, and we'll get back to the customers immediately with information of ourselves. If it needs to go up to our vets, then we can pass it straight on to our vets. And I think that's a key component as to why people stay with Buddy Bites.
I love that convenience aspect. I mean, I don't know if you saw, but there's a huge bag of dog food sitting there on the counter. And I hate seeing that. It's just a lot of Hong Kong apartments, they don't have enough spaces to store piles of dog food or dog snacks. So you are making sure that you have that fresh rotation of food regularly without having to find a space for that.
Yeah, exactly. I think what I mentioned, we were researching it more and more. Dry dog food particularly is a product that hugely suits that subscription-based direct-to-consumer business model. We knew that that was always going to be a great benefit to customers that were willing to try. And it's been exactly that. So our retention rate month on month is kind of north of 95% at the moment. And a big factor in that, I think, is the customer service, but also convenience. To go back to your point about it being intimidating, going up against big brands, it is, but there is a lot of opportunity there. You've just got to position yourself in the right way.
And another advantage is that you don't have to pay for warehouses, right? So how do you deliver the products from the factories to people's door?
We fulfill orders from a warehouse in Hong Kong. However, we ship from Belgium and Spain, is where our food is produced. Ship that to Hong Kong, and then order by order will fulfill to your door. But of course, that means we are circumventing the need to pay an extortionate rent for, particularly if you're looking in central locations or key residential locations, a shop front is always going to be extortionate. So, I mean, in our case, we kind of allocate that and a bit more margin towards the giving back angle. But again, that is an opportunity.
I have a huge respect for people who started something entirely new in their career in 2020 or in the past 2 to 3 years. And you did that. And what was the tipping point for you to switch from your real estate job to focusing on Buddy Bites?
Two sides to that coin, I think. Definitely was a time where things were challenging. However, we did have a decent bit of time on our hands, whether it be working from home or whatever else, enabling us to allocate some time to Buddy Bites and spending time on focusing growing it whilst not having the risk of really jumping in head first. There's an interesting book called When to Jump. And the kind of main takeaway was you can always allocate time if it's something you're passionate about. And that's exactly what we did. We really spent a lot of time for sort of 12 months. We kind of just gave up the rest of our lives to some extent to really focus on making Buddy Bites work.
And what were the doubts and how did you deal with them?
I guess less so doubts because we were pretty happy with how things went. We knew immediately we had a bit of product market fit. There's always that imposter syndrome aspect of not being in the industry previously. I think there's always at the start a bit of doubt in the fact that, hang on, my experience in the pet food space, does this put me in the right position to launch this brand? And there was a bit of that early on. However, making sure we spent time with the vets, making sure we spent time with the nutritionists was able to eradicate that to some extent. We knew there was always going to be challenges, and it's just kind of learning as you go and learning fast as you go.
Would you say Hong Kong was the right place to start a D2C brand? I mean, relatively, compared to US or Europe, it's a small city. And the dog community here is very small and tight. Do you think that helped in a way?
Yeah. In the case of Hong Kong, for a VC, the addressable market of pet food is not that big. For an individual or for a pair of co-founders, it is relatively large. And it's very, very much a good testing ground because it's dense, because word can spread pretty quickly, because you can run the operations relatively well. I personally feel there's still a huge amount of growth within the direct-to-consumer space in Hong Kong. There's definitely downsides to it. The addressable market's the most obvious one.
Because it's food at the end of the day, I would imagine there are some regulations to pet food, even if it's for dogs.
In Hong Kong, there is little to no regulation. So you do have to be very conscious that you are purchasing from a brand that's regulated by one of the outside parties. In some regards, that made setting up the business relatively easy, but also it meant that we had to lean on expertise to ensure that we were doing the right thing.
Yeah.
I think as a young brand, if you have any issues with the food, your business is done for. So we were extra careful to make sure that we were doing the right thing. Because there's no pet food produced in Hong Kong, they rely on wherever you're importing from is where the pet food will be regulated.
And what were some key strategies that you pushed to differentiate from other multinational conglomerates?
So I think the primary kind of pillars we focus on, giving back, huge one. That's probably our key differentiator. People seem to resonate better knowing exactly what they're doing. They can work out exactly what they're giving back. So that's a big portion. The customer service is huge. We really push hard on, if someone messages us, we try and get back to them in 5 minutes. It's not a email you in the next kind of 2 days. It's we will try and respond immediately. If you run out of food, we'll courier to you. If your dog doesn't like the food, we're happy to sort out free returns. Very much we understand and want our customers to be customers for 10 years, not 10 weeks or not 10 days. And we understand that kind of providing good customer service on the front end is what will guarantee that. The convenience, obviously, compared to the pet food industry particularly, is a lever that we can really rely on as well. The branding of pet food has been pretty static for many years. We've tried to kind of pivot on that and make it really millennial, make it really pastel colors, make it bright, make it stand out. And little things such as we include the dog's name on the front of the packaging and make it very personalized.
So when I look at some of the old packaging design, I look at it and I wonder, is this going to taste good for my dog? Or is it going to taste like medicine?
It looks medicinal, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I agree with that. I think more and more now pet consumers, they understand brands a little bit more than in the past. So that medicinal marketing might not work so well. But you're right, I think safety should be guaranteed, and more so now as the pet food industry gets better regulations. That is the case, and no longer do you have to make it look like you're buying medicine for your dog.
Exactly. Tell me how quickly it grew. How many people were subscribing to your service the first month, and how many of them now?
We partnered immediately with Catherine's Puppies, who was a shelter that Chris, my co-founder, had adopted 2 dogs from. So when we first donated food to the shelter, she posted about us, and immediately, I think we got like 50 customers within about an hour of her posting about us. And that was just clearly people who are huge followers of Catherine, huge followers of dog shelters. And immediately that was a bit of a light bulb whereby we thought this giving back angle is a key component, and people really want to have a yearning to give back. And we're well aware that ensuring that we have product for the entirety of the market will affect growth. But we've grown pretty much consistently at between sort of 50 and 100 customers net per month. As we grow, obviously the churn rate of 4% or so per month has been a larger factor, but adding more product, adding more SKUs, I think really helps ensure that people are happy with the product, and that we can see customer data and we can see why people cancel. We can see if they're looking for specific recipes, and there's additional recipes in the case of salmon and sweet potato. That's a collaboration between A, our vets and nutritionists' opinion on the pet food space, and B, customer data and seeing what customers want.
So you rely on data?
Heavily, yeah. I think when we see someone cancel, they have to answer a form, just ticking one of the boxes, I'm sure you will have seen previously. And then they have the option to write in comments. And we get some very, very useful data off the back of that. So we've seen that consistent growth of kind of around about 75 customers net per month. And as we add new products like we saw last week, we get an immediate hit as well of an increase in growth.
It's interesting you mentioned data, because I saw your co-founder's post on LinkedIn. He was doing analytics for the past 2 years of sales. And just when you went to Singapore, left Hong Kong for travel, the sales took off. What do you say about that?
The work was done previously, right?
So numbers.
You can't always trust the data.
You talked about APAC, and now you have operations in Singapore and Hong Kong. And we briefly touched upon, your ideas about Taiwan and Korea and Japan as well. What do you think are the factors that make it work or not work in these cities?
Hong Kong, again, for us is relatively large, but as we grow, we really need to access further markets. Singapore, obviously, we're in the process of launching. We think that's a relatively proven track of going from Hong Kong to Singapore. There's a lot of similar sort of consumer profiles there. And that giving back angle, I think, will be our biggest differentiator moving into new markets. And then it will just be a matter of making sure we find the right people to help us launch in those particular markets.
Why do you think across different cultures, people care more about companies that are doing good and giving back to society?
There seems to be a stigma with big brands, with this large monopolization of a number of industries, and I can understand that. And therefore, when you get a young brand up and coming, looking to do some good along the way, I think it's kind of refreshing. If there's a specific thing you're passionate about, and by buying a good that you would already buy, you can give back to that passion, then that's a great thing. So it's beginning to catch on, and I really hope it does continue to do so.
When I think about my purchases and when I consume, I tend to choose companies like that because I don't necessarily know how I can contribute or give back. And sometimes that becomes the biggest hurdle, right? So if I can do something good by consuming products or services, then why not?
I completely agree, right? Yeah, which is again, I guess, back to the point of why some people are adverse to donating, where they just know like X% is going to a certain location, but you don't really know where it's going. So being able to find a brand that you can hopefully trust to do the right thing, and which is why I think that tangible giving back angle is the easiest way to prove that. There's no real shortcut. You can see images of us donating. You can see the shelter's comments on it.
Many of our viewers are in the corporate world who are looking forward to building their own company or working for themselves. Any advice for them?
You can make time if you want to, if you really have a passion about something. And who knows, you might spend a bit of time on it and realize you don't have a passion. Fine, at least you tried. So I really think if you've got an idea, vocalize it, get feedback off people, and just get that snowball rolling.
I love that, because there are people who think about it. And from thinking about it to doing it is a huge step. And from doing it to doing it consistently is another step. I used to think that if this fails, what am I going to do? Like, I've spent so much money. But now I tend to think, at least I tried. And if I have a similar idea in the future, I know what to avoid, what not to do. So I resonate with that.
For sure. And like worst case scenario, you'll learn a lot along the way.
And what do you think has helped you become an entrepreneur?
I kind of feel I'm a bit of a jack of all trades, master of none. I have a bit of marketing background, I have a bit of finance background. I feel like I can be decent at most things, but I'm not a sort of specific specialist. And I think that's certainly useful if you're in a space like ourselves, where there's an ops side to it, there's a marketing side to it, the development side to it. That certainly helped. Yeah, I think I've always probably had a little bit of an itch to scratch, as I mentioned. I've always been interested in that aspect of like beginning to read and listen to things about the entrepreneur space. Becomes quite addictive. It becomes very exciting. Yeah. I now found it more and more interesting.
Well, I resonate with it a lot, because I always think that I have an inch deep knowledge about everything. Just little things, just random things. But people like us, we can judge who to hire. We can see what kind of expertise we need to fill in the holes. And we rely on their expertise. I'll
be the first to admit that there's plenty of aspects to Bloody Bites or any business, but Bloody Bites in particular, that I'm clueless at. I mean, digital marketing is a great example where we've hired somebody and she is 100x better than me. And that's hugely important to the business. I think being self-aware of knowing where you're good and knowing where you're not is very important. There is not a single business in the world that has been developed to a decent level from one person. We really need to now put our trust in the people we hire, and therefore hiring good people is very important. It pretty quickly will become the case where the actual operations and functioning of the business, 80-90% of it is not yourself, even more so the larger you get. And the importance really becomes about building a culture and hiring the right people.
We've come to the last question. The naked truth. What's one naked truth that you've never shared anywhere before? About you?
The dreaded question. And I think it's probably quite an important thing to mention, which is something that I've not really spoken about prior to Bloody Bites launching, probably about 6 to 12 months prior, at a time when I was in a job I really liked, doing the part-time MBA. I was exercising loads, I was eating healthy. I went through a bout of depression. I always consider myself a hugely optimistic person. I was certainly never a depression doubter, but I absolutely never thought it would happen to me. And perhaps Bloody Bites really helped massively in that regard. Also, my partner, she was amazing. Friends certainly helped. But I think it's an important thing. I've seen it probably with a few friends now, and when I vocalize it to some friends, more often than not the case, some people come back and say, yeah, me too. So I think it's something I'll probably try and vocalize a bit more now, because it's important too. I don't think I've ever spoken really much about that previously, other than to very close friends. So
thank you so much for sharing that, though. I think it's important to talk about it, and I am one of them. And I spent a lot of money on therapy and all that. but it has given me the opportunity to learn more about myself and trust myself for having the power to overcome that. So I hope it did for you as well.
Yeah, I think taking onus on it, right, and going out and actually finding solutions as you've done is important. I think I was the opposite. I buried my head in the sand for a while, which definitely didn't help. So yeah, it's a good thing to talk about. I think it's better being out in the air than otherwise.
Thanks, Ryan, for coming today, and I hope everything goes well with Buddy Bites.
Thanks. Thank you so much for having me. As I said, I think that Hong Kong really needs something like this. It's great to see you speaking with some interesting entrepreneurs. I don't know if I consider myself one of those, but thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.